Out. Not everybody's here. So color is represented on the web by a couple of different mechanisms, but most of the time it's by a 6-character code. So like this red color right here is represented by FF0000. This is actually hexadecimal. This is a very saturated red color. It's all red and no other blue or green. It's an RGB value. The first 2 characters are how much red there is. The second 2 characters are how much green there is, and then the last 2 are how much blue there is. So this is a very red one. This one right here has a little bit of green and a little bit of blue, but no red. And this one down here is a little bit of red and a little bit of green, but no blue. So this is kind of, in general, how colors are represented just by the 6-character code. And it doesn't really matter what the code is. You see a color you like, just ask it what the code is, and then especially in this app right here, this Peloton app, you can actually just copy this text into your system clipboard and then go over here and let's say, okay, I want to play around with my theme. Like I have this one selected here. I want to change my default color. I can just paste that in there, and now that's my default color. You know, I can put whatever color I want in there, and now it's the overall color, main color for this theme, rather than one of these pre-selected ones. So that's kind of how that works. You can actually do some other interesting stuff. Where was it? Oh yeah, if you add a logo, you can get it to, let's see if I can find one. Check this out. This is neat. I have in here, yeah, here we go. I have this LLTC stem logo here. There we go, stem logo, open. And watch what it'll do is it'll analyze this image. So you've seen the LLTC stem logo before, and it'll find dominant colors in that image that I can then apply to my theme. So you can actually color coordinate your whole website with some logo that you choose or some image that you choose. So here it's finding red and yellow, and it's giving me those 2 shades. And if I click select one, it'll apply that as the dominant color for the entire theme, which I think is kind of a neat feature. And look what else it does with respect to color. The text up here is dark when I have the yellow background, but it'll automatically select the appropriate contrasty color with the background. So if I use a darker color like red, it makes the text white. If I use a lighter color like yellow, it makes the text dark. So Google Sites does a lot of this kind of stuff that you'd have to do manually on many other site generators, or if you were doing it by hand. It does it all for you. You don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of an interesting feature when it comes to choosing colors. You can choose them yourself, you know, using the color picker over here. And it will automatically adjust things like text colors and whatnot to be ADA compliant. Or you can choose one of these that it already has selected for you. So I don't know, I think it's pretty handy. It really does a lot of the legwork for you when it comes to color theming. But if you do want to select a color palette, you can choose some colors and then incorporate them into your website in other ways. If I chose this as a color palette, I can use these colors. I think I can change the color of various text and things, can't I? Yeah, section background. Oh yeah, there we go. I can add emphasis colors to things. Ooh. Or you can add background images to these templates here. Anyway, so that's kind of how it works in Google Sites. You can apply these colors however you like with very little real effort. but it's usually done in this themes tab. This is where it happens. The other place is if you upload a logo, it'll pick dominant colors from that logo and use those. So you have a number of different options for branding and color scheming. So let's look at the last couple of slides here from this thing. So, oh yes, yeah, that was the other thing that about colors that I thought is worth mentioning is the color of text. The old wisdom was that all text should be either black or white. And not very many websites are actually still doing that. So this is our textbook. And what color is the text in here? Granted, I did not choose these colors, but this is not white text. What is it? It's kind of a like a pale gray color. And this is really, really common in a lot of websites. I think there are a few that still use just straight up black text. I think Wikipedia does. Oh, you mean? Yeah, I think this is just straight up black text. But a lot of websites are transitioning to using kind of grays. This is gray right here. Even this is gray. This is like a darkish gray color. This is not black text. And I think that this is an interesting development because technically it's less contrast. It wouldn't be good for necessarily for someone who has who's visually impaired, but again, it's still on a white background, and the contrast is good enough that people can read it no matter what, as long as you're not completely visually impaired. So I think this is an interesting thing from a design standpoint because it's actually easier on the eyes when you use gray text, either a dark gray or a light gray, depending on the background. It makes things a little bit nicer and more friendly for your eyeballs. So not necessarily black text, not necessarily white text, but it should have good contrast. And Google Sites automates a lot of this stuff for us. But it is important to think about it and recognize these things. So, graphics. This is actually where we were at last time. The thing about images, and we're going to talk about that when we get to like photo editing later in the semester. We'll talk about optimizing image sizes a little bit. For this project, don't worry about it too much. I wouldn't say go in and have to change the resolution on various images and stuff. It's not necessary for what we're doing. So what they mean by optimizing images is if you display an image as a certain size on the screen, it's going to take up a certain number of pixels. It's going to take up 500 pixels this way and 250 pixels this way or something. It's going to take up a certain number of pixels. But computers are really, really good at taking like a really big picture and smushing it into a really small space. But what ends up happening is your computer is only displaying these many pixels, but the picture is actually this big. It's having to download a lot more data than it would have needed to. So that's what they mean by optimizing pictures, is by actually downsizing the images to the size that they're actually going to be displaying at. And so this is a way of saving bandwidth, saving people's data, and making your web pages load faster, which is pretty critical because most users expect pages to load within a second or two. This is becoming less of a problem. Can anybody think why? You're having to spend less and less time thinking about this than you used to if you're a website designer. Why do you think that is?
It's getting faster.
Yeah, straight up. That's exactly it. Back when I first started doing web design, everyone said you have to exactly specify the size of your images without fail, or else your web page is going to take forever to load. And now they don't really do that, especially with the advanced, the emphasis on responsive design, where it has to look the same on a wide variety of screens. the image is almost never going to be the same size that it's displaying at. And a lot of web design textbooks you see today are still going to try to emphasize this. So what I think the best practice now is more like, just don't have huge overblown pictures. You don't need a picture that's 1080 pixels wide to fill a screen unless you are literally giving away desktop backgrounds or something. You really only need, you just have the sizes of images be sensible rather than having them be very specific. It's true that a web page will load faster with smaller image, but in this day and age, we're talking not, unless you have lots of images, it's going to be almost unnoticeable. So you want them close, but you don't really need to be as exact as you used to be. I'll show off some tools in the textbook before we quit for today. There is one thing that you do want to do for to maintain ADA compliance with images, and I'm going to bring this up here, and that's add alt text. Where is my web browser? There we go. So I have an image here, and if I have a screen reader for somebody, if I'm blind and I'm using a screen reader, all it knows is there's an image here. It can't tell me what's in the image because computers are really bad at recognizing the contents of photos. They're getting better, but it requires like machine learning and all sorts of very specialized programming to do. So in the HTML code, the code that's behind the scenes of this website, there's a little place for alt text. Google Sites just lets you have an interface. If I select an image, this little menu pops up, and I hit the 3 dots, and then it says add alt text. So if I click on that, it lets me add image of a capybara. So this description of the image is, in the old days of the internet, alt text was for what would happen if the image failed to load. Nowadays, it's for screen readers. It's still there. It still does the exact same thing. It's like, and if the image does, for whatever reason, to fail to load, this is the text that would display, but no longer is that kind of why it's there. It's there for screen readers so that people know what's in that picture. And then you just hit apply. And then now if that image fails to load for some reason, it will display that text. And if somebody's using a screen reader, it'll say, it is a picture of a capybara. Now, there are some situations where you don't necessarily need alt text. And that's if it's a purely decorative image that has nothing on, no basis. I mean, this isn't a decorative image. This is a picture of an example of what this page is about. But if for some reason it was like just a logo or something, a picture that we just wanted, just to add some little visual appeal to the website, if it's purely decorative, you would add a checkbox right here. So Google Sites does this. It omits the alt text, and then it adds a little thing in the HTML code that tells screen readers to ignore the image completely. I'm sure, I don't know, I'm sure that screen readers have some sort of settings which allow them to still find pictures like that. But for the most part, it'll just skip over it. You won't have to worry about it, and it won't trip up any screen readers. So if it's a purely decorative image, this is how you would do that. Let's see here. So yeah, I suppose we should stay ADA compliant. A capybara. Capybaras are rodents. You guys know that? It's the largest rodent in the world. And they're very, very friendly. Like, they just love everybody. They're like the hippies of the animal kingdom. So that's kind of how ADA compliance works. You want to have that alt text. And for this project that we're doing, I guess I didn't specify it, but I do want you guys to have alt text on all your images. And I'll check for it. Navigation, I think we kind of already talked about. However, it's worth revisiting. This is the page from earlier in the slides. We have 2 different kind of areas where we have navigation, we have on this one we have a navigation bar at the top, and then we have the 2 call to action buttons here, which are dark bold text. So these are there to catch your eye and get you to act now. These ones are for if you want to navigate the site and kind of look at some things and just kind of explore what's going on. So this is a really standard way to do things. I do think it's worth looking back at this. Oh yeah, our text. Our text has a sidebar that doesn't move. So this actually allows you to access any page in the text without going anywhere. On any page, you can access any other page. And the same goes for like our course page on Canvas. You've got 2 sidebars. You've got your kind of like overall account sidebar, which has like your dashboard and your account info and your profile picture and all that. But then the course has a sidebar over here. Yours doesn't look like that. Yours looks like this. It has a series of buttons on the side that give you quick navigation to various areas of the site. So those are usually positioned at the top or the left-hand side. Occasionally, you'll have websites that'll have sidebars on the right as well. Yeah, like this one has a sidebar on the right, which has a to-do list. So my student view account has lots of stuff that they're behind on here. Some other sites. So when you're like surfing on various websites, doing whatever you do, like Facebook or whatever, take a look around at the navigation, see what's on the right, what's on the left, what's at the top, and kind of like ask yourself why you think they made the decisions that they did. Like, why did they put those things where they are? Is that useful to you? Is it useful? Is this how you would have done it? Another thing that's really common is having search features. Some websites have them. Some, in fact, the textbook has one. We have a search bar up here, so I can say Google Docs. Yeah. So if I type Google Docs in, it actually comes up with a bunch of pages on this website that have things that are interesting or things that are relevant to that search. And the other thing is what are called breadcrumbs. If anybody's ever read the story of Hansel and Gretel, there's these are breadcrumbs right here. So this is like how I would jump back to an earlier site or an earlier page in that section. So they're breadcrumbs. So like if I get too deep into a website, this will bring me back to where I was before. I believe. I thought this used breadcrumbs too. Oh yeah, it does. Right up here. So these are our breadcrumbs. So we have ITECH 150, and then it's in the pages section, and then it's in the discussion board guidelines page. So these are breadcrumbs that kind of that show us a map of how far we've gone into the website. And we can always jump back to a previous thing, like back to the pages section, which has all of our pages, and then we can go back to ITECH 150, which is the core, the root page. You'll find lots and lots and lots of lists of best practices. The best way to, if you're interested in looking at, whoops, wrong one, this one. Some best practices. There's a link at the bottom of the text that has a really exhaustive and thorough list of best practices for web design. A lot of it you don't have to worry about because Google Sites does a lot of the, kind of forces you into some a set of best practices that, it's not going to spell check your stuff for you, but it will have nice layouts and things and choose colors for you, and you don't have to worry as much about it. But it is something worth looking at anyway, so that you get like a sense of why some choices were made, why colors are used the way they are, why sites are laid out the way they are, things like that. It's really I think it's really handy to know some of those like overarching principles. Just some of the big ones here, like being consistent with things like colors, graphics, fonts, things like that. Always try to keep everything unified. Everything should look the same. You know, one page shouldn't have a green background and one page have a red background. You kind of want everything to be basically the same. A nice balance of graphics, text, and empty space. Empty space is just as important, or what they call white space. Even if it's a red background, it's still considered white space. Making sure that it looks good on phones as much as it looks on a web browser, on a desktop. Make navigation easy to find, like right at the top, just on the left. Very rarely on the right, but I don't know, maybe some people do that. A nice color scheme where the colors complement each other well, and there's lots of tools to automate that process. Make sure you have alt text on all of your images. That's not the only ADA compliance thing. It's also high contrast colors and things like that for people who are colorblind and whatnot. Don't use crazy fonts. Don't use scripty fonts. Don't use things that are hard to read. So using sane, normal, common fonts that are easy to read is really important, especially for visually impaired people that don't see as well. Like older folks can't read that scripty stuff as well because it's all frilly and whatnot. Spell check everything. Use spell checks. I highly recommend getting something like Grammarly. It's free. It's a browser extension, and it spell checks every text box you type into. It's actually a really awesome tool, and you can get it as an add-on for like Google Docs and Microsoft Word. And it doesn't just check your spelling and grammar. It also checks things like style and helps you kind of like have your language be a little bit more professional. It's a really neat tool, and it corrects me, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. That does read a little bit better if I do that. You know. Yeah. For more, check the text. Stop recording.